Guys, so I have some more before bed thoughts. Don't ask me why they come before bed, but they normally do because I'm thinking about things and you know, sometimes I am not dressed up when my thoughts come to me. So here I am again in the all natural, and I'm cool with that. But I wanted to talk to you about what we want versus what God desires for our life. Um, the base is coming from First Peter 4, verses 1 through 2. It talks about how Jesus came in the flesh, and when he was here on earth in the flesh, he endured things in accordance to God's will. And so it begs the question for us to think about are the things that we are here on earth doing, are they in line with God's will? Or is it something that's coming from a fleshly point? Now, obviously, that's not the exact quotation, but I do encourage you to read First Peter 4, verses 1 through 2. Um, this video is really stemming from the question of whether or not our desires are the same desires that God has for our lives, including mate wise. Now, I chose that scripture because it really kind of allows you to evaluate your own life and see what are your desires. What are you truly um, focused on versus what God is telling you to focus on? Also, it gives the example of Jesus. Jesus is our earthly example because he came to earth. He endured many of the things that we are facing on a daily basis. So, the idea is to use him as an example in order for us to grow and cultivate ourselves. So, one of the things that I just want to talk about is what is it that you desire? I mean, if you really sit back and think about it, what's on your mind? What's on your to do list? What are some things that you're aiming for, be it in a mate, your career, your day to day life? Some simplicity, it can be something that's complicated, but what is it in 2018 that you desire, be it currently or if it's in the future? For me, I want to talk about love and from that desire. I'm sure if we're all honest with ourselves, we all have some kind of form in mind in regards to who we're interested in or what our ideal mate may be and how things are supposed to pan out and all this good stuff. But where does that really stem from? Really sit up here and ask yourself, how did you come up with that idea? I mean, it doesn't just pop out of thin air. And when you ask yourself that, ask yourself, is it something that the world trains you to think? Are you basing that off of your own personal thought process? Or is that something that God has embedded in your heart and now it's being turned into something that you're seeking and you're hoping that will manifest? I sometimes when I get caught up in thinking about what's next, am I on the right path? Oh my gosh, I like this type of man, that type of guy. Oh, it would be great to do this, do that, have a professional, da 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 da. I'm sitting up here like, is this something that God has put in my head? Or is this something that I think just looks good on paper? Where does that stem from? And I challenge you to really think about that because we really need to beg the question, and it all boils down to not my will, but God's will. Um, and is what you're asking for something that you yourself are executing or you yourself are trying to become? Now, this is not to say that, oh, if you're demanding, I don't know, let's just say a professional, for example, then okay, does that mean that you yourself need to be in a professional field? I personally think that you need to be striving for what you're aiming for. You can't, for example, sit up here and demand a king, and you're behaving and conducting yourself like a peasant. That's not to say that God can't bless you with greater. That's not to say that you aren't going to, I guess, be elevated by whoever it is that you connect with, because you're supposed to be going to that next level when it comes to a mate. But it is to say, are you placing stipulation people based upon something that you don't plan to execute or be a part of? The idea is for us to be our best single selves in order to unify with the right individual. And even when I was told, I'm a member of Linked Up Church, and one of the things that they discuss is even when you're married, the idea is still to uphold that ability to be comfortable in your singleness. So that way you don't take the unnecessary into a relationship, or something doesn't occur to the point where you can't fix it because you forget who you are and you get lost in that, especially when it comes to your connection with God. I see a relationship as being something that takes a lot of work. It takes precedence over many things. You go from thinking about your own lifestyle to now you are a part of someone else's, and you guys are supposed to be balancing that out with each other and thinking of the other person. But one of the things that I admire about my church that they brought up when they were talking about this topic is how you never want that relationship that you're in to ever take precedence over God. God should always be the forefront, which is why if you practice these things while you are a single, meaning putting God first, that stems from Matthew 6:33, then it'll come natural when you add other things to your life, like a career, like a mate, because God was the forefront anyway. And as you started off, and he's going to continue to be the forefront because he's the one who brought you that individual. He's the one who brought you that career. He's the one who brought you whatever it is that you're desiring. But keep in mind that what you desire may not show up on your doorstep the way you envisioned it. This is why we have to build our relationship with Christ. This is why we have to keep an open mind. This is why we have to be led. But by the same token, as we are led, don't be afraid. One of the stories that come to mind is one of the disciples, and forgive me because I don't want to call the wrong name because I'm a little tired, but he was in prison, and a group of individuals were praying for him to get out of prison. And so an angel appeared to him, and of course the prison gates were open and he was freed. And so he comes knocking on his home door where they're praying for him to be released. And now all of a sudden everybody is surprised, like, oh my gosh. I think it might have been Paul, if I'm correct, but forgive me if I'm not. And people were just so surprised that he showed up. Well, why are you surprised, honey? You were just praying that he would be released. So that example is stemming from the idea of whatever you're praying for, don't be so caught up where it's kind of like once it shows up, you're in shock and you're not accepting to it. Because, were you not just praying for that? Were you not just praying for someone in particular, something that you desire, and all of a sudden it happens and you get it, and now you don't think you're worthy of it? What sense does that make? You better embrace your blessing, honey, and run after it. But anyway, I digress. And by the way, it's so funny on here because it looks like I'm not looking at the camera, but I really am. So I don't know, whatever. It's still a work in progress. I'm not perfect. So it'll be okay. But basically, I just want you guys to know that a lot of times the things that we have in our mindsets, sometimes that's some brainwashing from the world. And we have to deprogram ourselves from what we have learned or what we think we deserve based on our experiences in life, and reprogram ourselves from a faith standpoint and believing and trusting in God for things, being able to grasp and receive wisdom like it talks about in Proverbs, so you can recognize once you have received it. And in the meantime, until you receive that gift, that career, that significant other, that you're constantly trying to work on being the best single that you can and the best individual that you can, stemming from the will of God, as First Peter 4, 1 through 2 talks about, in order for you to be recognized by that opportunity and be prepared to embrace it. So I'm going to continue to do my research and branch out even further in regards to that. If you want more information on that in particular, in regards to maybe relationship topics for singles, I'm still kind of looking into that. I still, once I get on these videos, it's so funny. I just kind of let things flow. So this wasn't exactly the direction that I want to go in, but I just wanted to share my thoughts with you all. Feel free to always reach out, suggest topics. We can have open discussions and even set dates where we all can interact with each other and you can invite people. So, like, subscribe, share. I don't mind you seeing me in the natural if you don't mind. But for now, I'm going to get some much needed rest. Deuces. Have a good one.